Welcome to the GSMC Business News Podcast, the show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. If you're looking for a podcast to keep you informed and ahead of the game in business, the GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Business Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Moriah. Thanks for tuning in and kicking it with us on this episode today. Today is Saturday, February the 20th. It's a little close to 3 in the afternoon. I was sitting here working on some other business things and decided to record this episode right now. Lately, I've been talking about grit a lot, and I thought I would share that with the audience. So today we're going to be talking about grit. We're going to discuss the meaning of grit, what the letters stand for. I like to use acronyms. There's a pretty cool grit acronym. It's just 4 different words for the 4 different letters in the grit, the G-R, the I, and the T. And then I'll be giving you some tips on how I practice grit in my business day-to-day activities. So let's hop right on to it, okay? So again, we're talking about grit. I'm sure you want to know, what is grit? What is the definition of grit? Grit is the capacity to recover from things quickly. There's another good definition that says it's courage and resolve and strength of character. I like to think of it as the Mamba mentality. I played a lot of sports growing up, so I do have a lot of some sports analogies. Big fan of basketball. A huge fan of football. If I could play in the NFL, I would be a wide receiver. Sidebar. All right. So in those sports, there's a lot of grit that gets involved in that. You have to be able to deal with a lot of pressure. There's a lot of passion in the sport. A lot of people who play the sport are very passionate about the sport. They absolutely love the sport, and they are willing to put a lot of things on the line for it. I remember when I played basketball, the first time I ever conditioned, I was so tired. I didn't see the importance of why we had to practice all the time. I just wanted to show up on game day and get it done. But little did I understand that with these type of things, you have to practice because practice makes perfect. And with grit, a lot of people don't have it. It's a skill that can be cultivated. It's a skill that can be groomed, and it can be grown in vast ways. I like to think of diamonds. A lot of those precious metals need pressure in order for it to really shine the way that it does. And the same goes for our business walks. I'm a big entrepreneurial advocate. I believe everyone has the entrepreneurial gene in them. It just takes the right stimuli to bring it out of that person. So should everyone pursue entrepreneurship and should everyone pursue business? Probably not. I'm just being honest. If you can't eat, dream, and breathe your business and your goals and your plans, and if it doesn't wake you up in the middle of the night because you just have to write down one more little note about something that you're doing, chances are this is not the lane for you, right? So grit helps you to understand that. When you sit and you really think about what you want to do and how you're going to achieve it, because everyone needs a plan, right? When you really sit and think about that, you have to understand that grit is involved. Whether on a large or a small scale, there has to be a level of tenacity in order to win. Think of any championship you've ever witnessed. We just recently had a Super Bowl go by. I am a Tom Brady fan. I am from Philly, and I know that probably sounds blasphemous, but I love his grit. He was not the most athletic quarterback to ever see the league. He was not the quickest quarterback, However, his grit made him, in my opinion, the most precise during his era. So although he wasn't this great athletic, quarterback that a lot of us love in the league, he had the tenacity, he had the grit, he had the perseverance. Despite his disabilities for the game, despite what he couldn't do or what he was deemed incapable of doing, he kept going back to the Super Bowl. And he continued to win. And his grit was so heavy that it got to the point, not even those he beat, it's understandable that they couldn't stand him. But even teams he didn't beat in the Super Bowl were tired of him. As far as fans go, they're just like, man, I'm tired of him winning all the time. That's what grit does. Grit sets you apart. Grit is that thing that keeps you motivated. It's that thing that, despite what's going on around you, it keeps you going. It keeps you level-headed. And because there comes a plan, grit, it comes with a plan. You have to have a plan when you have grit. And because of that, you have to understand that you have to stick to that plan. And towards the end of the podcast, I'll be discussing how I stick with grit and how it works for me. I am a business owner. I own Mitchell. I'm a co-owner, Mitchell and Anderson Enterprises, located in Philadelphia. And under that umbrella, we help other businesses. We have our own businesses that we work on as well. And in those businesses, the big theme that we have is pushing through no matter what's going on around you. So with one of the brands, there's a few that we're working on, but one of the ones that's doing, I would say, fairly well for us to still be new, it's called Lady M's Fashion Bands. And my partner and I, we joined together to create it, and it's a hair accessory line that mainly targets women. We do have some male customers as well. We have some great things coming up soon. And we have gone through a few different trials in a lot of different eras. It's not the easiest when you're working in business. It's definitely not the easiest. And I say that because there are times where you don't have any sales. That's the biggest one, I think, because you put in so much time and effort to get the product just correct and just right and make sure everyone loves it. And then you go through this patch where nothing's selling. And then that thing comes, that aha moment comes, and then you're finally like, okay, this works. This can work. And then you start getting sales. There are also other times where, business connections just fall through. You think you had a good plan. You think you had a good idea. And you kind of wanted to work with someone and life happens. Or they decide to pull out at the last minute. They're not really feeling it anymore. Things like that. You have to understand that there will be a lot of hard and tough days. There are just some days where it's just not going to work out. And grit is what keeps you grounded. I believe that every entrepreneur, every business owner, or every business enthusiast should sit and really plan out what their goals are, what their reason is, what their faith is, what their hope is, and what's their driver. I believe a driver is very important. What's the end goal? It's easy to get wrapped up in the moment. To me, sometimes it's harder to focus on the end goal because you want to be there so bad. And I can understand that, in business, this is a tricky game that we play, and it's a very risky game to be an entrepreneur because in entrepreneurship, you are assuming all the risk. You're not working for a company where they can assume the risk for you. I work a 9 to 5 outside of my normal business. And if anything is to go wrong at that business, I know my employer will assume the risk of any decision I make. Now, if that results in something as extreme as termination, I understand the risk involved. I'm very aware of that. I'm used to it. It's nothing out of the norm. Obviously, no one wants to be fired. I just understand the risk that I'm assuming. In business, there are going to be times where you just have to pivot. For example, we're currently still dealing with a pandemic, and a lot of people are not aware or don't know how they're going to survive or how they're going to get through this time. Grit helps with it. I won't say that grit is this great thing that we can all look to and, we're just all going to win. Grit doesn't always end in winning. And one example of that is one of my favorite and I would say top 5 NBA players of all time, the great Allen Iverson. Being from Philly, I'm definitely a Sixers fan. Hands down, shout out to the Sixers right now. They are killing it. Shout out to Coach Doc. Shout out to MVP. I feel like we're on our way. So I'm a big enthusiast for that. But yeah, back to AI. So back in 2001, the NBA Finals, we made it to the finals. The Sixers were in the finals with Allen Iverson. I wouldn't say we had the greatest bench, but obviously we made it to the finals, so we did something right. Allen Iverson was our lead guy, of course, and we made it to the finals against the LA Lakers. Now, I used to hate the Lakers because they knocked us out of this finals. Again, grit doesn't always end in winning. And in this finals in particular, Allen Iverson stepped onto the court that night with a different kind of look in his eye. There was a different type of tenacity in his eye. Like, he understood the weight of the moment he was in. Everything he practiced and everything he went through led to this great moment. And I do believe that grit is what carried him over, because if you look at the next 4 games after that first game, you can see that grit went down. The tenacity, it wasn't as strong and as fierce as it was. He played 52 minutes that game. I'll never forget. It was June 6, 2001. I believe that was like a Wednesday or something. My mom was at work. Me and all my siblings were at home waiting for this game because we watched the season. We saw how good it was going. We were in the finals, so everyone was amped up about it. The whole city, I want to say, was just on fire that day. I just remember it feeling very electric because grit is influential. If you stand around other gritty people, you'll understand that you start to take on their characteristics. At least you should. So that night, Allen Iverson played 52 minutes. Scored 48 points. He had rebounds. He had offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds. I think he had like 5 or 6 assists that night. Remember, he had a height limitation. Allen Iverson was not your tallest player in the league. He was very short. I remember playing PlayStation with him on, I want to say it was 2K, and they said he was like 6'1" or 6'2". I'm like, there's no way Allen Iverson is that tall. But he didn't let that stop him. He didn't let that limit him. Now, although they did go on to lose that final series, that first game I'll never forget. I think anyone who was, a Sixers fan at the time, or even just an NBA fan at the time, saw that game and saw the way he played and saw how tired Kobe, RIP, was, and saw how tired Shaq was that night. This little guy that has to be under 6 foot was on the court just killing it. His grit really stood out, and it showed everyone that when you really have a plan in place and you really have this tenacity, you have this mindset that no matter what's going to happen, I'm willing to win. I'm willing to put it all on the line. I'm not going to let anything stop me. I don't care about my limitations. I don't care how short I am. I don't care what background I come from. I don't care what educational level I have. I don't care how little experience I have. I'm going to continue to push forward. I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to quit because it got hard. These are all of that. This is all grit. So whenever you think of, and you face a hard problem and you think, man, I don't know how I'm going to get through it. And then you decide to keep pushing. And even if you don't do it, you still pushed and you gave it your all and you threw it all on the court that night. Right? That's grit. And that's what keeps you going. Everyone has it. So it doesn't just apply to business. I love business. This is my world. So I'm always constantly comparing things to business and seeing how they correlate. I think grit is across all platforms. It's across all genres, all niches, all industries. Grit is in everyday life. A lot of people live in poverty. You have to have grit to make it through the next day. A lot of people are depressed. You have to have grit to still get up. I work remotely. I still have to get out of bed. I still have to clock in. I still have to do my job. Grit helps with that. So grit is not just a business-centric word. I don't want anyone to believe that business only Grit only applies to business. Grit can be applied to anything. So again, during this episode, we're talking about grit, and we're going to get into the different steps of grit. There's a 4-word breakdown to acronym for grit. It's GRIT. We're going to be discussing that. And then towards the end of the episode, again, I'll be getting into how I practice grit and how I use it with business, how I use it in my personal life, and how it keeps me going, okay? So stay tuned, and we're getting ready to cut to a commercial. And when we come back, we're going to hop right into the GRIT acronym. Again, that's the G, the R, the I, and the T. And when we come back, just be ready. Take notes if you would like to. I'm the note taker. I love to take notes. I think taking notes is good for me. It's something just so different about when you really sit and you write down what you're planning to do. And you write down how you're going to go about it. And then you really implement what you're doing. It just makes the world of a difference. So I do like to write things down. So when you come back, have your notepad ready. We're going to walk through it. All right. So stay locked in. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for a podcast that gives you all of the latest news from the world of finance? Then check out the GSMC Financial News Podcast. We'll delve into the ups and downs of the stock market, changes in the economy, and news from the world of real estate and technology. From breaking news on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or the overseas market, to updates on the bond market, if there's money to be made, we'll cover it on the GSMC Financial News Podcast.
Again, you're tuned in with Moriah, and today we're discussing grit. So before the commercial break, we were talking about what is grit, how it's defined, what does it mean. One of the case studies I use, I'm a big sports fan, I'll say, mainly basketball and football. I love to equate things to those two. So the case study that I used was Allen Iverson and how he went to the NBA Finals. I'll say he carried the team on his back. If you're from Philly, you understand what I mean. He really held it down in that first night. I just remember how crazy the city was going. It was dirt bikes out. It was music blasting from every car. I remember one of my neighbors, he had fun that night. And by this point, he's sweating. He has his jersey off, and he's, it's June, so everyone's outside, and he's running up and down the street with the Allen Iverson jersey like, we're about to get the chip. We're about to get the chip. Allen Iverson's grit is what did it. I won't even say it was his skill or his playing, how he played the game. It was not how he played the game, or, I'm speaking on his skill set. It wasn't how good he did it. To me, it was the way in which he did it. Everyone from in the arena to home, on your couch watching the game, understood that Allen Iverson came to win that night. If no one else on the Sixers came to win, AI definitely came to win. Again, he played 52 minutes, 48 points. The kids nowadays are averaging about that, career high games of 50. That's not so uncommon at this point. Back then, a 48-point game in your first, finals win. That's pretty big. And that all comes from grit. And again, grit is that ability to persevere. It's the capacity in how you recover quickly, or the courage in your resolve, or your strength of character, as we described it before the commercial break. All right, so let's hop right in. There's a few acronyms that go into grit. I like to use acronyms. It's easy to understand. I would eventually love to start teaching business, so I do love acronyms. I think acronyms are good for self-learning. So again, if you have your notepads and your pens out, let's hop right into it, okay? So the first letter in the acronym GRIT is G. G stands for goals. Now, when you set goals, which you all should, goals should be big. Never limit yourself. A lot of people tend to limit themselves when it comes to their goals, and the reason why is because they haven't been on the other side of completing the goal. That's what grit gets you to. Grit gets you to the other side of your goals. So if you've never used it, you're new to this, right? So this G is like goals. Yeah, I set goals. I plan to order out this weekend. Sidebar, me and my partner, we are on this strict no takeout budget right now. And in some upcoming episodes, we'll talk about budgeting and the different ways that I budget and how I go about that for my business and my personal life. But right now we're budgeting on not ordering takeout. I would like to say I eat fairly healthy. So I do love fresh vegetables and fresh fruit, and I'm kind of shying away from meat and everything right now, but I don't think I'll ever give up seafood, and I don't think I'll ever give up chicken either. So I think, ordering out started becoming difficult. So at this point, I was forcing myself to spend money, which if you order to eat, if you don't have kids anyway, I don't have any children. So I just have 2 dogs. I have a pit named Pharaoh, and I have a crazy little Yorkie named Sebastian. Sebastian's the oldest, and he bosses the pit bull around. It's the funniest thing. But yeah, that's all I have to take care of right now. So, my living expenses, my house, my car, student loans, things like that. So with ordering out, it's easy. It's easy to do. We live in a hustle and bustle society. I am in business, so it's easy to, just order out some food and watch some TV before you crash. It's hard to plan, to cook. Now, although I love to cook and my family and friends love my cooking, which I'm grateful for, I have a lot of fun cooking. Sometimes I just don't feel like it. You just don't feel like it. Business can, you might have a bad business day and you just don't feel like getting into the kitchen and pulling out something and figuring it out. But setting that goal of I'm not going to order out, right? Break it down into smaller steps. So I didn't want to just go cold turkey. There's a nice pizza spot around my way, and they have amazing salads. Amazing salads. The grilled chicken salad with the shrimp, and I add egg, and I add my tomatoes, and I tell them no or light croutons. And you see, that's why I'm going on a break. That's why my goal is to stop ordering out, because I'm doing too much. So with that, I love their food. And I started looking at my budget, and I realized I have more money that I could be putting towards business expenses. And what I found myself doing was depending on more sales, which should always be the goal. You should always be looking to make more sales. However, I was realizing that by my ordering out, I was taking money away from what I could be investing, what I could be using to further business, what I could be using to further my personal brand. Because once you're in business, you want to start working on your systems and you want to start working on your brand. And because of that, I found myself putting money into places like takeout, where it could be put into business and it could grow the business. So my goal was, I'm going to stop ordering out. We're going to begin to cook. And, I love to cook, so I might as well just get back in the swing. With the pandemic, we've been so caught up and stuck in the house. I was really looking forward to eating out. So that's how I started it, and then I got sidetracked, and then it got very dangerous. I started realizing I was spending hundreds on takeout. I love a certain restaurant downtown. I will not reveal the name because I probably spend way too much on the food, but it's really great steak. And I realized, we're doing too much. We're spending way too much. So the goal is to not eat out. And you have to break that down into the smaller steps. So no, I didn't go cold turkey with it. But what I did was treated myself. Okay, every other week, date night with my partner, we'll order something small. So we'll cook for the full week and some change. And then for that other week, we'll order a little something to reward ourselves for how good we're doing. At this point, I don't even want takeout food anymore. I had some takeout food and it messed me up real bad. And it's the food I always get. But once you cook that fresh in-house food with fresh, fresh seasonings and all the trimmings, your body begins to change. because you broke down those goals and you started moving with the steps, right? So that's G. That's the goals part. You want to break it down, set the goal and then, treat yourself until you get to the point where you're no longer doing takeout, right? Now, I do support other cooks and chefs, so I don't think I'll ever get to the point where I don't buy anything outside, but for the most part right now, we're trying to stick with it. How do I stick with it? That's the R in grit. That's the resilience. Because setbacks are going to happen. I remember during this whole time, I'm like, okay, we're doing really good. We haven't been ordering anything. We went grocery shopping, got everything we needed. And I'm like, you know what? After you go grocery shopping, you just don't feel like cooking because you've just been looking at food for hours and hours. And then the grocery stores, it's not really the same like it used to be, with COVID, and can't have everyone in the store at the same time. I'm a germaphobe almost. I'm like borderline germaphobe, so I don't want to touch everything other people have been touching. Now with the pandemic, I think it's increased to not to a dangerous level, but I'm definitely aware of my surroundings. Like, this is dirty. Everything is dirty until I know it's clean. I think I blame the pandemic for it. Not a bad thing, just, trying to find the balance. Some germs are good germs. Well, anyway, I was having some setbacks. A little tired of cooking. I get off work. I work a long shift. And then as soon as I get off, I take an hour break, stretch, maybe walk the dogs. And then I come back and I work on my brand. And some days you just don't feel like it. So what I ended up doing, I ordered out when I wasn't supposed to. And that was a setback. Because then I had to deal with the consequences of fumbling that. Setbacks are going to happen. At that point, I believe that day in particular, I had worked a long shift. I was really tired. I didn't feel like cooking. I don't think we had something that I wanted to go with the food we were making. So I buckled under the pressure. Because I could have just ate something else, but I didn't want that. I wanted what I wanted. So I ended up ordering it. Stomach started hurting. It was just I think I just finally recovered from that. So setbacks will happen. You're going to go against what you talked about doing. But you have to stay with it. Another type of setback, to make it more broad for those listening, sometimes you might be at work. You might be in school. I'm in school right now. I'm almost done. And I almost done my grad degree in business. And things are going to happen. I know, for example, one of my nephews, I have a few nieces and nephews, and one of my nephews is in high school. And, prom and formal dances and athletics and everything got put on pause because of this. So when I discussed this with him, just asking, I love the kids. Moriah loves the kids. I absolutely love the baby. So I'm always checking in on them. And I had to ask, are you okay? What's going on? Well, he said he wasn't too sure. He did discuss his friends and how this setback is not okay for them. And they're really, really struggling. And a lot of them are really sad. And some of them are very depressed. And all these mental things are happening. A lot of mental challenges are happening to a lot of people who are living through this time right now because they're not used to it. And as a child, not to say that some of these youngsters are childish in their ways, but by definition, they're still kids in my eyes. A lot of them haven't had to deal with the pressures of life yet. Now, if you grew up like myself, then you have. So I understand your grit if you're out there and you're pushing through and you had a childhood that, might just not have smiled down so nicely on you. That's why I pursue business. I had my own setbacks. While it wasn't pandemic, ensued, I still had setbacks because of my upbringing, my financial background, my parents' financial background, and what we could and could not afford. The same thing is happening right now with some kids during the pandemic in school, and this is causing an educational setback. However, although my nephew is going through some trying times right now because of the pandemic, I think he's faring pretty well. I'm very, very proud. I'm a proud auntie. He's getting into all kinds of colleges and schools that I wanted to apply to, and I guess at that time, I didn't set the goal as big as I should have. I did eventually pursue school. Again, I'm about to finish grad school, but seeing his grit, seeing my nephew push through, despite what is going on around him. That's true resilience. That is truly setting a goal. When he got into, well, he's been talking about this since he was little. I want to say middle school. He wanted to go to college. So all throughout middle school and high school, he made sure he got honor roll. He made sure he did well in all his courses, all his different language courses. He's very excited about that. He did amazing. His goal was to go to school. So despite his setbacks, despite the pandemic, he still has to get on his calls for school. He still has to do what he has to do. He still has to push through despite what's going on around him. So again, those I hope that helped you. The beginning acronym letters, the G and the R in our word grit. Remember, G stands for goals. R stands for resilience. With your goals, you want to set very big goals and then break them down into smaller steps. For me, my goal was to stop ordering takeout. My smaller steps was to treat myself every other week. And then from there, hopefully I get to the point where it's down to once a month. With resilience, setbacks are going to happen. It's what you do, despite your setbacks, that's going to push you forward to the other side of the acronym, which is the I and the T in the grit. So before we get into the next commercial break, I just want to say thanks for listening. Be sure that you follow us on all our social media platforms and leave some good reviews for us. Again, today we're talking about grit. We're talking about what it is, the courage and the resolve, the strength of character, how you get through it. And then towards the end of the episode, I'll be discussing how I practice grit, what I do to get through my days. That might not be so easy, but grit is what pushes us through. And don't forget our case study in AI and how he killed it in the 2001 NBA Finals, right? It's a good case study. I always say you should go out there and try to look up some cases of people you admire, see what their grit story is, and see how they persevere, right? So when we come back again, we're going to be talking about the I and the T in grit. Stay locked in, guys.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings on of those worlds? The GSMC Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
We're back. Thanks for staying locked in with us on the next half of our episode. Again, today we're talking about grit, what it means, how do you persevere, how do you get through, what does it mean for you, how does it apply to business, and towards the end of the episode, I'll be discussing how I get through and persevere and how I keep my grit mindset going. So right now, we're going to get into the I and the T in the grit. Remember before the commercial break, we talked about the G and the goals and me and my takeout issue. And then the R, resilience, and how my great little nephew is just killing high school and getting ready to go into school despite the pandemic and despite other setbacks that he may be facing. He's still moving forward. And that's what grit is. Grit is pushing forward, the courage and the resolve. And how do you recover quickly? What is your strength of character? Remember, our case study for the day is Allen Iverson and how he killed it in the 2001 NBA Finals. I was a young boy then. That's what we say in Philly. When you're a young kid, call you a young boy. The old heads might call you a young buck. During that time, it was great to see AI's grit. And again, with AI, even though he did not end in triumph during that NBA Finals series, he did go on to lose the next 4 games in a row. That first game, he played his heart out. 52 minutes on the floor. 48 points. offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, assists. He was just, it was an amazing thing to watch live. So you want to always stay around some grit-filled individuals. How do you do that? Let's get into the next half of our acronym for grit. The G, the R, the I, and the T. Remember, G is for goals. R is for resilience. Now let's get into intention. Now, if you know what intention means, intention is basically what your motive is. What is your motive? There's an old quote that says, faith without works is dead. What does that mean? Well, faith is your belief. What do you believe in? What do you think you can do? What do you believe you can achieve? Right? And what are works? It's what you do. So faith without works is dead. If you believe in something and you don't work towards completing it, chances are you won't get the results that you want to get. That's what the intention is in grit. So you set your goals. You make sure you're willing to go through all of your setbacks. And then you set up your intent. And what is that intent? That intent is, this is what I plan to do. This is how I'm going to push through all the troubles that might come my way. And this is how I'm going to do it. The intention is what you're going to do, right? Now, a lot of people have a hard time with intent. Some people want money in business. Some people want fame in business. Some people just want to set their families up. Some people want to make sure that their younger generations can live and can move and grow up in a better way than what we did. I can at least speak for myself. I would love for my nieces and nephews to see me as the rich aunt, right? You know, I just swoop in during Christmas and other holidays and just drop them off some bread and then go travel somewhere, right? That's my intent. My intent is to set up the ones coming after me, to teach the others around me. And by doing that, I believe that it will work. I believe that those following me will understand what I'm trying to do. They'll see the vision that I'm trying to do. They'll understand what I'm trying to do. And even if they don't, I'm still willing to work for it. So, again, my goal, I'll continue to use my example of not eating out. I'm big on budgeting, and I have to practice what I preach in this world of business because it's easy to get sidetracked and it's easy to just get tired, come home and order takeout, right? So my goal is to stop ordering so much takeout. I had a setback, my cravings. My cravings were getting really bad, and I wanted takeout really bad, so I ended up ordering it. Stomach started hurting. I think I was out for like a day or two, just trying to regroup. I'm like, ooh, that takeout took me out because I was feeding myself fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. Went to the produce junction. Like, I did a full-blown grocery shopping. And I went against what I said I was going to do. And I ordered out. Got myself messed up. How am I going to recover from that? Well, now I asked my partner to be my accountability partner. So with that, I'm just going to take a sip of water. Having an accountability partner is very important. During this grit walk, it's hard. It gets really, really hard, You're sitting there trying to figure out how you're going to do what you're doing and how's it going to get done and what are you going to do to pursue what you're doing. And it can be very, very tough at times. A lot of times people don't understand what it means to have intention behind something. They don't really understand what it means to push through and to do it with passion. I love the word passion and combining it with the intent because passion is what drives and keeps the intention. So with passion, I feel like it creates a sense of excellency. Your intent should be to do it how. It's basically the intention. What is the why for how you're going to do it, right? So the goals, this is what you want to do. Your resilience is how you're going to push through and do it. And your intention is more so the why. why do you have such faith in what you're trying to work towards? Why do you believe in it so much? Why, you have to have a clear sense of your beliefs and your values, and you have to live by them. You have to understand that you're imperfect. You have to understand that life is a series of choices. You have to understand that even though there might not be a way, you have to find a way. And you have to constantly practice. So for me, intention encompasses passion and practice. And I remember when I was in basketball, again, like I spoke in the beginning of this episode, I hated practice. I just honestly hated it. And it wasn't because of me being lazy. I didn't have the belief that practice made perfect. A lot of times people don't understand that practice is what will make it perfect. And that goes into the second part of the acronym. And the second part of the acronym is time. So remember, we have G, R, I, and T. We have our goals, our resilience. We have our intention. And then we have our time. So again, with intention, it's the aim. It's the target. It encompasses the goal. It makes you remember your passion. It makes you remember the reason for why you're doing what you're doing. Are you filled with good intention? Or are you filled with bad intention? What is this motive? Intention is, I don't like to use the word in the definition, but it's an intended thing. When it comes to a cut or a wound, the healing process of that wound is the intention. So I like to equate that with business. It's really the mental state that represents your commitment. It's the mindset behind the goal. It's the reason why. And a lot of people don't know their reason why. And that's why I say it has a lot to do with your passion. Because with your passion, you figure out what it is that you want to do. Why you want to do it. With me, I figured out my passion was writing. I have a passion for writing. It's a passion project. So I have my publishing company, Moriah Publishing Company, where I self-publish. I would like to eventually add other writers to the company as it grows. But right now, this is not a quick type of business venture, right? It takes many authors years to grow their craft. It takes many authors a long time to become a staple in their field of writing. I love one author. Her name's Terry Woods. She wrote a book called True to the Game. I'm a writer, so I write urban lit. And Terry Woods, her intention behind what she was doing was to reach others who have gone through what she went through. So she saw, she saw a few things living in an urban city. I can say, you see things that, as a child, you probably shouldn't see, and as an adult, you probably shouldn't see, right? So your goal is to get out of that environment. Your resilience is no matter what the setbacks, you might live in a neighborhood, unfortunately, that's drug infested or dilapidated built infrastructure. Although you have those setbacks, you might not have access to the greatest education, you continue to persevere. Why? Because your intention is to help those who have gone through the same thing you've gone through. And that's what builds the goals. So all of these words are intertwined. And then when you get into the time, you understand that it all gets better with time, right? Ain't that the old adage? It all gets better with time. Time is, I think, the biggest commodity in the world. I think it takes precedence over money. I think time takes precedence over, I'll even say health in some cases. Sometimes it's your health versus time. How much time do you have to get healthy, right? Time is very nuanced. When you're a kid, you don't understand time. You ever ride with a kid and they're just like, how long is it going to take? A little longer. Because you understand that if you tell them 4 hours, they don't understand how long 4 hours takes. They don't understand the depth of the time. It's the same with money. As a child, they either think you're rich or you're poor. You have some kids that think their family is rich, and you have some kids who understand their family is not rich, and you have some kids that think other people are poor, right? Why? It's not that they're being mean or they're being, rude about it. They just don't understand the commodity of it. I think time is the most precious and valuable commodity because it can never be replenished. If I decide to go gamble, right? I decide to go to the casino, or we'll keep it business related, right? I decide to invest in stock. If I lose money, I can always put more money in. And, there are going to be red days. The long-term goal is for green. So you want constant upward mobility, even if there's some pitfalls and some valleys that you have to go through. You want those valleys to still be going up. And that's kind of how I see the stock market. So setting a goal of this is how much I want to make with the market, understanding that there's going to be days where there are red in the stock market. This past week was a red week for me. But Friday, we looked up cryptocurrency. That's going to be another topic. I love crypto. It's new. It's innovative. Something different, right? So despite the red days, my intention is to build wealth. And that's why I set a goal of being in the stock market. And despite the red days, I want to build wealth. And I understand that it's going to take time to do so. The only thing I don't like about time is that you cannot get it back once it's gone. Once time is gone, once it's lost, it's gone forever. So you want to be careful when you're setting goals. You want to make sure you're being very wise with your time. You want to make sure that with time, you're spending it in a way that's effective, that's helping you to reach your goals, and that's helping you to move through the setbacks. Because when setbacks happen, you're now limited with your amount of time. And with time in business, you have to understand that, for example, like with customers, if you lose them, they're gone. Now, some might come back, but it takes time for them to come back. And time is not something that can always be bought. People try to put a value on time. They try to put the money value on it. Unfortunately, it's just I feel like time is the most wasted commodity. People hold on to their money, but they don't tend to spend their time wisely. And in business, time is money. I think in business, the only place where time is the only place where time is money. You have to practice your grit mindset. And it takes time. You have to be patient. We live in a cookie cutter society. We live in a microwave society. Everybody wants it to be perfect and done quickly. Unfortunately, you have to be patient. So again, the 4 letters that we use to describe our grit mindset, or our acronym for grit, is GRIT. G is for the goals. R is for resilience. I is for intention. And T is for time. Set your goals. Make sure you can push through the setbacks. Make sure you understand your why or your intent. And be sure to use your time wisely. Be patient with your time. All things get better with time, in my opinion. All right, so we're getting ready to cut to a commercial break. And then when I come back, we're going to get ready to wrap up our episode. I hope you enjoyed it so far. I'm just talking about a few things I do to maintain my grit, how I got my grit, and what you can do to apply it to either your business or your personal life, all right? Be back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hey, we're back. And again, right now, we're talking about grit today. We're talking about the goals, the resilience, the intent, and the time. And grit is the capacity to recover quickly. It's your courage and your resolve, or your strength of character. Again, I like to equate a lot of things to basketball. And I love the Mamba mentality, RIP to the great and late Kobe. The Mamba mentality, to me, is just another word for grit. Now, I believe, my personal opinion, is that everyone has the grit gene. Everyone has the ability to persevere. Everyone has the ability to be great. Everyone has the ability to push through. Sometimes it just takes a little outside stimuli, but I think everyone has the ability to do so. So how do I do it? I'm sitting here telling you guys what it is, and, my story of AI, and I mentioned Kobe, and all these great players that had grit and persevered and got through it. Well, for me, I played lacrosse. I played a lot of sports, but growing up, I played lacrosse. That was one sport and I never played it before high school. So I was a very, very newbie to the game of women's lacrosse. I came from basketball and track, so I hated the fact that I had to wear a skirt. I hated the fact that I had to wear these eye goggles. I had to learn, my role. I ended up playing left D wing. I would switch from occasion to play right D wing or home, but for the most part, my role was left D wing, and I used to be killing it, right? And I was new. My goal when I first started playing was to just get better with the sport. My goal was really just to play many different sports. I was a self-proclaimed athlete, and I did pretty good in all my in all my sports endeavors. But I was a left D wing, so I was a defensive wing in lacrosse. And when I joined, I was new again, and my coach just had faith. She had faith that I could do what I was planning to do, and she asked me what my goals were. Why are you coming now? You're almost an adult, and you're just now trying to play lacrosse. And my goal was to have better stamina, because in lacrosse it is a field sport, so you are running up and down a 100-yard field at all times. It's a constantly moving game. It's not like, with football, you stop and you snap the ball and you get into it and you stop. Lacrosse is more so like basketball. You're running up and down constantly. With me, because I played defense, I didn't have to always move as much. But when I did have to move, I was moving nonstop. So when my coach asked me what my goal was, I was straight up. I want to have better stamina when I'm running. And I feel like lacrosse will help me with it. I also want to get to the point where I'm starting varsity. And she thought, that goal was pretty big. Like, varsity, you never even played the game. You barely know how to hold the stick. But that was my goal. And I wasn't going to let anything stop me. I wasn't going to let the fact that my teammates had been playing since they were like 4 and 5 years old. And here I am, almost 16, 17, just now learning how to play the game. I didn't care, though. So I started on JV, and I worked towards my goal of starting varsity. Did it happen for me? Yes, it did. Did it come with some setbacks? For sure. People were very upset. People were very, very upset that this girl who barely knows how to play the game got this good on defense to the point where she is starting varsity over seniors. Now, in the world of sports, especially in school, one thing you don't do, word to loving basketball, never let a freshman take your spot. So at the time that I started, I was not a freshman, but I was a newbie. So we'll give me the freshman vibe. I was a bench player on JV, and then I moved up to starting JV, and then I moved to varsity, and then once I started varsity, that's when the setbacks came. Some seniors were not happy. There was one senior in particular who just had my back. And that's that. Remember earlier we talked about it, having that gritty person around you. There was one senior and she was cool with it. She was like, "Hey, I'm proud of you. You persevered through all of the bad games and all of the trials and the errors of turning over the ball." I wasn't a big turnover person, but when I would turn it over, I used to beat myself up really bad about it. Because I was new to the game. So I was overcompensating. Once I really broke down that big goal of starting varsity to, okay, let's make sure I have my form down. Let's make sure I can track down a player and create a turnover. Make sure I hit the stick just right. Can I intercept this pass that she's about to throw across the field? And again, I was playing with some girls that have been playing for a long time. So at first I did start off as a liability, but I kept going because my intent was to get better. My intent was to persevere. My intent was to be right. That was really what my intent was. My intent was, you know what, I'm going to start varsity and I'm going to get it done because I have faith that I can get it done. So what did I do? I began to look at my time in practice. So with other sports, remember, I hated practice. What's the point? I'm good at this. I don't need to practice as hard as I would if I didn't know how to play. But with lacrosse, I was brand new and I had no clue what I was doing. I had the right gear, I had the mouth guard, the right cleats and all that. But honestly, I didn't have the IQ for lacrosse that I really, really needed in order to excel to be varsity. So what I continued to do is on weekends when one of my coaches, when the JV coach knew what I wanted to do. So on weekends, she would set up some outside practice from our regular Monday through Friday practices. And every Saturday, she would set up time at the school. And if you wanted to come, you could come. If you didn't, that's up to you. She felt like practice makes perfect and that it takes time to get better. So with that, I began to show up on Saturdays, tired and all. And I would practice and practice and practice and practice and practice and continue to practice until I got to the place of starting varsity. Now, was our team the best? No. But I wasn't the best player, so I couldn't talk about, anything else. I was still trying to work on myself and still trying to get better my own self, right? But if I didn't set a goal, if I didn't push through my own handicaps of playing the sport, if I didn't have faith in what I was doing, and if I didn't practice and take my time with it, it wouldn't have happened for me. What I used to do around that time and what I still do to this day, I learned this from a good friend of mine. I set sticky notes everywhere. So if you look at my home office, if you were to ever see my home office, I have sticky notes on the monitor screen. I have sticky notes on my MacBook where I rest my hands. There's sticky notes there. There's sticky notes on the desk. In one of my bathrooms in my home, I have sticky notes on the mirror. Just some encouraging words. I write down the goals. I'm always writing. The reason why I say sticky notes, you don't have to use sticky notes. You can use paper. You can use paper and pen. You can put it in your phone. You can set daily alerts. There is a few people on social media that I like to follow who send emails every day with some encouraging items. Something about when the pen or when the ink hits the page and you read it and you say it out loud, it gets into your psyche. And I remember There's a story that Tiger Woods would record himself and saying that he was going to be a world champ. So regardless of, the other things, as far as the sport goes, he became that. And that's that encouraging word. You have to give yourself encouraging words. Grit is not this thing where every day you're just always on point. And you never have a hard problem. You never have a hard day. No. Grit is some serious, serious work. So you have to encourage yourself, right? So that's number one. Number two, plan to fail if you fail to plan. Plan to fail if you fail to plan. If you don't make a plan, if you have no goal set for what you're trying to do, I can guarantee you will not be successful. You have to plan things out. It's great to have goals, but if you don't have a plan on how you're going to reach that goal, we break those big goals down into smaller steps. That's where your planning comes in. When you set goals, you have to also pair it with planning. Lady M's, again, that's one of the brands that I own and I'm helping operate. We have sales goals, and we want to sell a certain amount of hair accessories. Again, we're still new, so first the goals were to sell a certain amount at the different vending events we had. Then we got our website, and our goal was to do campaigns and different fun activities for people to grow traffic onto our site so that people will visit the site. Now we've grown a little bit more. So now our goal was, per month to sell a certain amount of items. At this point, we have surpassed the goal because of how much time and intent we've had. Now we're looking on a week by week basis. Okay, we want to sell this amount per week now, because we hit our monthly goal sale. Now we want to break it down to even further. We want to keep breaking those goals down to smaller and smaller steps, because now, looking at our year over year, I can see how much we have grown. That's what grit does. Grit allows you to grow. It pushes you past what you're going through, and it pushes you to the place of having strong character. It's how you get through things. Now, again, this can apply to business. As you can see, it can apply to sports, and it can apply to your personal life as well. So, again, I like to write things down. I like to have some encouraging words for myself. I love to plan things out. I like to write down my plans, set goals, make them into smaller steps. And then the final thing is practice and patience. So once you set these goals, you have to continue to practice, because practice makes perfect. And then you have to have patience. Patience is hard, especially when you want the results right then, right now. You don't really feel like waiting. No one wants to go through the process. Again, remember, we live in this microwave society. No one wants to go through the physical process of, all right, today we did step 1. Tomorrow we did step 2. No, people want the results right then and right there. Practicing patience will help you to better manage your time. And again, with goals, we have the G, the R, the I, and the T. The G stands for the goals. I'm big on goals. The R stands for resilience, how you're pushing through despite setbacks. The I stands for intent, or your faith, or how you plan to get through things. Your why, that's basically what that intent is. And then the T stands for time, and time encompasses practice and patience. So again, today we talked about grit. We talked about that our case study today was Allen Iverson in the 2001 NBA Finals. We went through our acronym, the G, R, I, and the T. And then again, for myself personally, what you should give it a try is write down some encouraging words for yourself. Read them every day. Don't forget them. Make sure you have a plan in place. How are you going to get things done? Nothing works without a plan, in my opinion. And then the last step is the practice and the patience. Practice what you're doing. Have patience and believe that it's really going to happen for you. So again, it's your girl Moriah. Thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Business Podcast. It's brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And if you could please remember to subscribe, show a little love, write a nice review. That will help us so much. Remember also, if you can follow us on our social media platforms of Facebook and Twitter, that would be great as well. Again, it's your girl Moriah. Thank you.
You've been listening to the GSMC Business News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type GSMC into your favorite podcast app to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's podcast.